Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a brand new episode of Why Bother with your host, John Szablewski, the podcast that didn't need to be made by the host who really didn't want to make it. Today, I am joined by the ever-talented Dr. Roger Firestien, college professor, creativity consultant, and innovation facilitator. He has great stories to share. He's very lively, and he's doing this for a very, very affordable rate. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest, Dr. Roger Firestien. How you doing, Roger?
Doing great, John. Glad to be here. Very excited about being here.
I am so glad that you said yes to this, because it's always it's always one of those things when you ask somebody to do anything, most people don't want to do anything. So it's always a pleasure.
These are fun.
So, Roger, you and I share a little bit of a history. You were actually my college professor most recently in the fall semester in the Creative Studies program at SUNY Buffalo State, and that's where we got to meet. And today, our conversation is going to be mostly about you, but we're going to really touch on creativity because that's a big part of your life and and who you've been. So why don't we just set the stage? Why don't we take us back? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, John. Well, I grew up on a farm in northern Colorado. And when you're growing up on a farm, like you have like two or three models of people in your life. There's a preacher, a teacher, and a farmer, right? And my dad was a farmer. I was not a very good farmer, so I knew I was not going to follow in my dad's footsteps. And so I grew up and this is really interesting because as I was thinking about our conversation today, I had this beautiful luxury of growing up on this farm in northern Colorado. And, we had a lot of time, and I was an only child. And so I had to figure out things for 11 years. I had to figure out things to do. So the neat thing about it is that my dad would spend a lot of time with me. My mom spent a lot of time with me. And so I kind of had this whole big, huge playground that I realized later that I had. And so I would build tree houses out of torn down, chicken coops. My dad and I built a go-kart together on the back of an old wagon. There was a pond on our property, and I built rafts for that. And so I did leathercraft with my mom. I did photography. I did chemistry. I built model rockets. I think I probably at one time had enough stuff in my basement to blow up the house, but we're not going to talk about that right. You're 11. Hey, how does this go? And so when I was growing up, I either wanted to be like a scientist or a race car driver. And my mother, I just started taking piano lessons when I was about 7 or 8 years old. My mother's a church organist. She's been a church organist for years. And we'll talk about, I think, a little bit about how family influences creativity, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately as a father and as a father during this time. And as I'm growing, more gray and more up here. Anyway, so my mother made me take piano lessons, and I hated it. It's just like every Wednesday I had to go to this piano teacher, and she used to pinch me when I wasn't playing. And so, and I had visions of like hauling the piano out in the cornfield and chopping it up. That, so It was that bad. And this was until I was probably about 13 or 14 years old. And there was this minister at our church that had this little 4-string tenor guitar. Mm-hmm. And he bought a new guitar, and I somehow got interested in it. And so Sam gave this to me, and I started practicing on it. And it was really interesting. My parents probably didn't see me for the next 6 weeks to 2 months because I'm in the basement practicing this little 4-string guitar. I'm loving this. I'm just loving this. So I graduated to a 6-string guitar that we bought from J.C. Penney's. Okay. Did you know that J.C. Penney sells guitars? Well, they did back in the 70s. And I started playing guitar in church. And there was a fellow there who owned a guitar and accordion studio. Okay, teaching accordion was big back in the 70s, So
I bet.
Yeah. Well, it was a German sort of area out there, so German, Polish, hey. And so he said to me one time, he said, "Would you like to teach at my studio?" He said, "I teach guitar, but I don't know how to play guitar." Interesting. And so I started teaching there, and my mother drove me to teach my guitar lessons before I could drive, and it was like a few months away from my 16th birthday. So I taught guitar lessons. I played in jazz bands. I entered the University of Northern Colorado as a music major because I thought I was going to be a music teacher. Okay. And then I found that early on, I got pretty frustrated with it because one, it was a lot of solitary time. And as you know, and working with me in class, I'm not a solitary guy. I'm an extrovert. I need to be with people.
Of course.
And it was really focused on technique. And I thought that I would be doing some kind of creative stuff there. And that wasn't the case at all. So I started reading about creativity. I was also teaching guitar lessons at that time. And I thought that if I could get my students to get more creative, they'd enjoy their lessons more. So I started reading about creativity. And then I found this program at the University of Northern Colorado called the Individualized Education Program. And it is based on the English model where you work with like a mentor and then take a maximum of 2 classes. Mm-hmm. So I somehow got hooked up with this anthropologist, and Jim and I have become very good friends, Dr. James Warner. And Jim is not only an anthropologist, but he was a farmer, he was a sailor, he's a sculptor, a dancer, a musician, a cellist, a piano repairman. He's a real Renaissance guy, tennis player. And so he got interested in creativity, and we started this journey together along with a cohort of folks, but I was the only one saying creativity. And as I was reading books on creativity, one name in 2 places kept coming up consistently in the literature back in the 70s, and that name was the Interdisciplinary Center for Creative Studies at the State University College at Buffalo. Now, that's the Creative Studies Department. And Sidney Parnes and Ruth Knoller. And these were like the people that were writing the books on this. So this is April of 1977, and that I'm reading through this, and I go to the microfiche reader, you know,
Yeah.
and I find the course catalog for SUNY Buffalo State, and I find this phone number of the Creative Studies Department. So April of 1977, at that time, I'm living out at my parents' house. I'm on the farm because I was just a few miles away from the university. And so I was a commuter student at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I finally got the guts up to call out here. And so I dialed the phone, you know, and I get the secretary on the phone. And I tell her about that I'm interested in this stuff. And she said, well, Dr. Parnes is here. Would you like to talk to him? Now, John, I'm 21 years old, okay? I'm a kid in Northern Colorado. I've never talked to an author before in my life. All the authors I know were dead, all right? I thought you died when you became an author. And so I talked to Sid, and we have this marvelous conversation. And he said, we've got this Creative Problem Solving Institute, which is a week-long program that they've been doing since the 50s. We just started this Master of Science degree in creativity studies. Well, I hung up the phone, and I ran up the stairs, and I said to my mom, I said, Mom, I just talked to Sid Parnes in Buffalo, New York. Do you know what she said? She said, what? You made a long-distance phone call? Long-distance phone calls to New York from Northern Colorado were pretty expensive back then.
It's cheap.
Yeah, right. And so I flew out to Buffalo in June of 1977, took the Creative Problem Solving Institute, took a class, flew back to Greeley, Colorado, actually north of Denver. My mom and dad picked me up at the airport, and Mom said that's all you could talk about was creativity and all this stuff. I finished my degree. I moved out to Buffalo in June of 1978, packed up my 1973 Ford Maverick, nice. Drove across the country, 3 on the tree, you know, not even a stick shift, correct, about no cruise control and AM radio. Go across Nebraska on a Sunday afternoon listening to AM radio in the middle of the summertime. And so I got here and I did my degree, I think in about a year. I think I was the 7th person to graduate with the degree. We've graduated now with over 400. Is it 4? No, I'm sorry. I need to correct that. Over 600 folks that have got their degree now in creative studies from all around the world. Mm-hmm. I got my degree. I ran a little consulting company for a while. I started back at Buffalo State as an assistant professor in 1984, did that full time until 1994. Then went and ran my consulting company since then. And so I've been teaching pretty much continuously at Buffalo State since 1984 in a full-time or a part-time capacity. And then we can talk about the consulting in the books as well. But that's kind of the journey. And I'm just, you know, I turned 65 back in November. How do I look? I feel pretty good. I think I'm getting younger. Yeah. Um,
Well, they
and
say that you're only as old as you feel. So I mean,
exactly, I feel great,
that's great.
But I think part of that feeling great is just I'm really enjoying the work that I'm doing, and I'm just going to kind of do a plug here or something like this. This
Sure.
is laying around, and I thought this might be kind of fun to talk about. There's a piece in Creating a Flash, and we can talk about that. A page in Creating a Flash, and it's on page 38. And the quote is this: it's from Mike Wallace, who was the newscaster on CBS, I believe. And I didn't know that he'd written this, but I think this is just really great. The quote is, "If you don't wake up in the morning excited to pick up where you left your work yesterday, you haven't found your calling yet." Let me just read that to you again. If you don't wake up in the morning excited to pick up where you left your work yesterday, you haven't found your calling yet. Mike Wallace. And I love that quote so much that we gave a whole page to it in Creating a Flash. So that's kind of, and then over the years, there's been up times and down times. There's been challenging times. But one of the things I think that's really taken me through the challenging times is my ability to think creatively and of the things that I've learned. And there's I'm of the camp that you can learn to be more creative. There's techniques to do that. Alex Osborne, a famous Buffalonian who invented brainstorming and was a major advertising executive in BBDO, invented that stuff. And so that is where I come from, is that you can learn to be more creative and you can apply those skills in any aspects of your life or business or the world. We can talk about some of those things if you like. So that's a long answer to a short question.
Well, no, it's really fascinating, and I think that you and I share almost a similar story. Not so much, growing up on a farm and moving off to Buffalo, but or shuffling off to Buffalo. As they say.
I've never heard that shuffle after. It was the line "shuffle off to Buffalo" and Roger the Dodger. Right? I've never heard that.
But what I find to be fascinating about creativity is almost what you were saying, is that I remember, I don't know, I was probably in third, fifth grade. I'll say fifth grade. We'll just say fifth grade. And there was a documentary about Google. And there were people running around Google on like scooters, and then like the next documentary was like Pixar, and I didn't even realize it was like the most creative workplaces that they had on television, like one after another. And I said, I need to be a part of something where you can just feel like you're actually creating something, right?
Yeah.
And I did the film school thing. I went back to school to become an art educator. And then when it comes time to be a grad student, I had a few teacher friends that I actually had as teachers talk about the creative studies program. And I have to tell you, just by starting back in May of 2020, the year that we got taken from us.
The year of 2020, yes, right.
The year of 2020. It is like life-changing, and I cannot wait to continue. So I think that's really interesting that people that have that calling and that drive and enjoy the ability to synthesize stuff likes to understand creativity and how it works. So that is awesome. I think it's almost like a vocation in that.
Yeah, and I think too, it's just like, no, go ahead, finish up. I'm sorry,
no, definitely no.
And as you were talking about that, I always insist on teaching the beginning course at the graduate level because of one thing. First off, I want to make sure that folks get the fundamentals down really well, and I've been doing that for so long. But the other thing is, I just love to see the light bulbs go on to people over people's heads, because I've had people come in, and we work on real challenges, as you've experienced. So people come in, we don't work on academic stuff. We work on stuff that's important to you. And when we start to apply these creativity techniques, like redefining the problem in a different way, or generating lots of ideas, or coming up with new ways to implement your ideas, that just blows people's minds that they have so much ability to do these sorts of things. I recall one person who came in and her goal was, I want to lose weight. Well, that wasn't what she wanted to work on. And a couple of months later, she came back and she'd started a business. She had started two businesses. She'd finished a book that she started writing when she was 5 years old, and she had introduced legislature into the state government to deal with domestic violence. And it was like, and she's gotten her degree with this. Jessica Kasich is her name. She's fantastic. And it was just what she needed to say, hey, I've got some tools here that I can use to make stuff happen. And I can't begin to count all the people that are running businesses, that are doing social justice issues, that are doing extraordinary things in their lives, both personally and professionally. And having gotten involved in this since I was 21 years old, I feel so fortunate to be able to think this way, because this is just kind of the way you think about the world. It's like you think of options. If somebody says no, well, how might I do this a different way? And that is so extraordinary, and it's so important now to come up with more options than just the knee-jerk reactions that we've been facing in this era right now. So, yeah.
Definitely. Now, Roger, I want to bring something up, and we're going to talk a lot more about creating a flash in a little bit. But if I remember correctly, in the first few pages of the book, you talk about being on an airplane, and you talk about talking to the gentleman sitting next to you, and the word creativity, right? We have this is one of those things that it's like, what does creativity mean, right? What does that word mean? But I think you say it really interestingly. You say, well, people don't really understand the concept of creativity, but if you say innovation, we know what that is. Right?
Yeah. So I'll read it. Let's see. You sit on your seat. The plane takes off. Strikes up a conversation. The passenger next to me says, "So what do you do?" I say, "I'm a creativity consultant." Usually frowns. Creativity consultant, really? Well, I'm not creative. So you must be an artist. Do you teach backstitch weaving? I go, here it comes. Different trip, different answer. Pastor next to me. So what do you do? I'm an innovation consultant. Innovation consultant. Oh my God, I love innovation. It's so important. We love it. We got innovations all over. It's our corporate name. It's our corporate title. All this kind of stuff. And I think the thing is that people value innovation, but they don't know about this creativity stuff. And that's like saying, I want to bake a cake, but I'm not too sure about this flour stuff.
It's never going to last.
It's never going to. Yeah, this creativity is never going to last. Yeah, and I think what's the reason why that is we've mystified creativity. We've put creativity and people up on a pedestal, like the Picassos, the Einsteins, the Curies, and these eminent creators, and that's the only definition that we have for creativity. But as a matter of fact, we create in many, many different ways. Looking into the refrigerator and figuring out a way to make a meal out of leftovers, that's creative. Finding a new way to get your child to go to bed on time without all the crying, that's creative. And of course, developing a new business is creative. But what has happened is we've sort of deified, I think, that word creativity. And we've also kind of like diluted it that only the crazies are creative. And so that's a myth that I need to work on a lot. Now, that comes at me a lot that I have to defend. Sure. The interesting thing about this is that over the years, everybody's an innovation consultant or doing this stuff in innovation. I've stayed with the whole area of creativity. And now what's beginning to happen is in our culture, in our environment, creativity is coming up more and more and more, because I see it being brought back to the person, to the individual, particularly during this pandemic time. People are saying, I got to get creative in how I do this. Not how I got to get innovative in how I do this. No, I got to get creative on how I, entertain my kids, or I got to get creative on how I'm teaching school at home. And so I think it's become much more personal, and that's always been where I've been as far as creativity is concerned. Organizationally, people say we want to have an innovative organization. Well, you can't have an innovative organization if your people aren't creative, or if you don't treat them that way. And so it has always, and as I reflect back on this, started with the individual and then with the group. And then you can go out and build organizations and teams that are more creative. And I think the other thing is that, and we can come back to this as well, keeping it simple. Keeping it simple is so important.
Yeah. So when you that gentleman on the airplane, innovation consultant.
We love innovation.
So what if let's say I'm running a business and we're hitting some hard times, and we really are trying to change our path here and really invest in our employees and give them that atmosphere. So we call you. What is some of the stuff that you as a creativity consultant could bring to my business so that my people can eat again and I don't have to lay anybody off?
Well, first off, we're just going to love innovation when we come in. Well, I let me kind of give you the approach that we use. And this approach has changed over the years. and this used to be, we do a 3 or 4 day training program, with folks. Well, that is non-existent anymore. You can't get people to go to 3. So what my whole focus has been is we have people work on stuff that's important to them individually. Okay. And also in stuff that's working on important to the company as well. And so oftentimes I'm brought in to work with more specific problems, so we need to have a problem over here or have a problem over here to deal with this. So we'll put a group together. We'll train them in some of these techniques. We'll have them generate some ideas and put those ideas into action. But I think the crucial thing that we really need to take a look at is that, oftentimes when I've brought into an organization, I just did a TEDx talk on this for Omaha, Nebraska. And the purpose of the talk is what you think is the problem is probably not the problem. And so oftentimes what I've found is that, I've been brought in for this, but that isn't the problem at all. All right. And in my whole career, about 99% of the time, what you think is a problem is not the problem at all. They've redefined it. Mm-hmm. So we kind of really look at what the real issues are. But also it would be, okay, so where do we want to start? And first off, let's really redefine what the real issues and the real problems are here. Instead of coming in and said, well, we want all the ideas to make our business better, that's not going to work. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's going to be too broad. But if we take a look on specific challenge areas, I don't even call them problems anymore. I call them creative questions. Mm-hmm. And I think the creative questions really kind of softens it. It refines it a little bit, because what we're looking to do is we're looking to question the situation in a new and creative way. And then when we open it up by asking how to or how might, it just changes the whole culture. It changes the whole organization, and it changes the individual. But what I would do is I would start with, what are the specific things that you need to deal with in here, give a little bit of training on it, and then work those as we go through it. Mm-hmm. So it's all based on not case studies, but doing the real stuff. So,
doing the real stuff. Yeah. Now, do you ever find that that managers or business owners are a little, maybe, I don't want to say reluctant to put in the work, but they're maybe hoping for like a fix-all, like a magic potion that they can just take?
Yeah, the magic bullet. Yeah.
The magic bullet. Because problem solving or creative problem solving, and I know this, from taking the courses, is you need to be fully vested. And I find that maybe in 2021, people are really just trying to find a quick fix instead of really trying to really focus on what that true problem or challenge is, right?
Yeah, just like in 1991 and 1980 when they were trying to find the quick fix too.
Right.
and I think that's probably sort of a societal thing. They used to say, you watch a television program and in an hour the problem gets solved. You solve 2 or 3 problems. You really can't do that, right? And once again, it kind of goes back to kind of our definition and our kind of our culture is that we want it now, we want a quick fix. But oftentimes, the challenges that we're dealing with today are not so simple. They're incredibly complex, and they have so many different challenges in front of them. And so when I'm brought into an organization and they say, we need to really fix, we need to do this or we're dead, or we need a silver bullet for this. Yeah. It's probably too late. It's probably because they're not going to see it. Yeah. And if they see it, it won't, they will not perceive the solution because they just can't see the solution. They're so close to what the problem is. It was interesting. I was talking with a person who does a lot of work with not-for-profits, and she said, I'm working with this not-for-profit on public relations, and the not-for-profit needs to raise $2 million. And so she says to him, she says, well, you want to raise, so what's the real problem here? We want to raise $2 million. Well, what's the real problem? We need $2 million. Well, what is the problem you're trying to solve here? And then how might you convince people to give you $2 million? What do you want that $2 million for? Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, we need the $2 million, give us $2 million. Well, look beyond that. All right. If you're going to ask me for something, what am I going to be involved in? So how to convince people of the value of giving that money to the organization. And unfortunately, that's what happens. And then the other thing that happens, particularly in times like this, is that people will revert back to their comfortable behaviors. So if you're in an organization where you think your job is to manage a lot. You're going to manage more, and you're going to micromanage, because that's all you have control over. And people, they don't have the control over anything that's surrounding them. So all of a sudden they become micromanagers. And I have a number of friends in organizations that are saying, I used to be able to do all this great stuff, and the people above me let me alone, and we did great stuff, and now they want to tinker around with everything. And so that is going back to the wrong behavior. Those people that are micromanaging need to be looking outside instead of inside, because the solutions are not going to come from inside micromanaging. They're going to come from the outside and looking at other people that are doing other things and getting more input in. So that's one of the things that I would say right now, is that people will go back to their most comfortable mode. They'll micromanage, and they'll micromanage even more. And it is destructive to an organization.
Yeah. And I've worked for an organization that is no more because of just that. We hit a financial ruin, and there was some issues going on. And instead of trying to brainstorm and as an organization try to figure out a way to get out of this, it was a lot of quick fixes that, in turn created a downfall of an organization.
Yeah. What's that line? You can't shrink yourself to success,
Yeah. Well, yeah, they shrunk themselves.
Yeah. Let's lay these guys off. Lay these.
And one of the things that I found so funny is that I had worked there for maybe just over a year. It was a year and a month. And over that, when I started in June of 2015, they had 200 employees. It was a pretty, viable.
Yeah.
By the time I was let go on the last day, we were down to 45 employees, and it was like a skeleton crew. I mean,
just carnage. Yeah.
It was death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah. And it didn't feel real good staying there either, did it?
No, not at all, because you never knew. It was, it got to the point, I always laugh about this because it gets to the point where you're like, I'm just showing up to work because I really want to see what happens today.
Yeah. I'm slowing down to watch that car burning over there. Right? Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So, Create in a Flash came out. Create in a Flash came out in 2020.
Yep.
And why don't we talk a little bit about what you hope to achieve with the book, and the process. As an author myself, I really enjoy hearing the process of fellow authors. So why don't we start with what the mission statement of the book was, and then we'll go to the process.
Yeah, the whole purpose of the book was to make creativity simple, make it practical, and help people to apply it in their world. And make it simple, practical, and help people to apply it in their world. The other thing is that I didn't want the book to be filled up with a lot of creativity jargon. I also didn't want to have it filled up with a lot of creativity cliches, like the invention of the light bulb or the Post-it or anything like that. You can research that. So in the commitment that I made in the book is that I was going to get examples of people that in many cases I've interviewed, that I've talked to, that I know, or that I've been recommended to. And so that is the majority of the cases that are in there. The other idea behind the book was, and here's kind of the story. When I did my, I'll go back to my farm days. When I did my second book, and I've got a copy of it here, Leading on the Creative Edge, I pulled it off for this evening. I sent it out to my dad, and this is like a hard copy with a jacket on it and everything, major publisher. Sent it out to Mom and Dad and in Colorado, and I'm talking to Dad on the phone, and I said, well, Dad, how'd you like the book? He goes, that's pretty good. I read the first 25 pages and fell asleep. Where are the pictures? And he was joking about it. But the thing was, his dad was a farmer. He was very visual. And so, I mean, he could plant cornrows so straight you could shoot an arrow down him and not hit a cornrow, if you were a good shot. And that was without GPS. And so sort of the process, let's go to the process of creating a flash, because it has been one of the most fun, enjoyable creative processes that I've ever had to do. I was fortunate recently. We were able to get kind of some windfall and some profits from some things a number of years ago. And so I began to do some projects. I fixed up the house. I fixed up the windows and put new windows in, put a driveway in, And I won't forget this because I'm standing out on the front porch and I'm looking at the driveway, and it's September 1st, 2018. And I said, well, I've done this and this and this and this. I've got all these projects done. Guess I'll write a book. Okay, it was almost that, I said, but I don't want this book to be like any other creativity book. I want it to be creative. And I was really inspired by Seth Godin's book, What to Do When It's Your Turn, and It's Always Your Turn, where he has all these pictures and this beautiful stuff in there. And so it was like, no, it's got to have pictures. It's got to be fun. It's got to be colorful. And so I talked to my SEO person, Sam Insalaka, who runs the Brew Room, who does wonderful SEO work and is my webmaster and handles all of that. And I said, Sam, I need an art director, and I need an editor. And I said, I want you to find somebody for me, because he's hooked into the Buffalo community as far as the creative folks are concerned. There's much better than I am. And so he said, well, look, you've already been working with somebody who I think will be a great editor for you, and her name is Heather Lazikis. And so he said, I've been sending your blogs out to be edited, and Heather edits them for you. I said, okay. And so I talked with Heather at a Creative Mornings Buffalo event back a number of years ago. And so we hit it off, and he said, and I want you to talk to Cassandra Ott. And so what happened was Heather and Cassie and I got together, and Cassandra is the art director. And I shared the mission and the vision of the book with them, and they bought into it. And we had the best damn time writing this book. Now, the interesting thing about this was I said I was going to write this book on September 1st, 2018. And I think, as you might know, we did the big book launch on September 19th, 2019 at the Buffalo Museum of Science. We had like 200 folks there and stuff. So we did the book in less than a year. Mm-hmm. And it's full color. It's 4-color. And when I began to look for publishers for this, I started to shop it around. And I would get to these folks and they say, well, we don't really do full color, or, you need to have more of a history. You need to have more than just a few books out there. And so it's like, heck with it. I'll just start my own publishing company. And so I started this little company called Green Tractor Publishing. And because I had a little LLC named Green Tractor, that I was going to do some other things with a number of years ago, and didn't really do anything with it. And so it was a natural to do that. And I like green tractors. I like John Deere tractors. I'm farming. Tractors are cool. And so we started that, got a little web page up for it. And essentially I realized that, and in talking to folks that had gone with major publishers, that, today what a publishing company really does is their job is to promote, and they're still asking you to promote and promote and promote, even if they publish it. Mm-hmm. So I had the art director lined up. I had the editor lined up. I had the printing house lined up. And so it was like, why don't I just go ahead and do this? And then we got it on Amazon and Kindle and stuff, which is an incredible process, and Barnes & Noble and Ingram, and Heather did all that kind of work for us. And that's really, and then the promotion is really up to the author. So I hired a publicist, Lori Ames from PR Freelancers out of Long Island. And that's essentially the same thing that a major publisher is going to do. And so we were able to do that and put together a team that just is just rocking it. And I'm still working with Heather and Cassie and Lori. We have other projects that we're working on right now. We can talk about those just a little bit. But that was the process of going through it. And the process was, I would write and it would go to Heather. She'd run it by Cassie and she would mock it up. The other thing that we did that was really neat is, and I recommend this book. The book is called Write Your Book in a Flash by a guy named Dan Janelle. Write Your Book in a Flash, Dan Janelle. The thing that he recommends is write the executive summary first, write the vision of the first book first, and then you don't have to write from the beginning to the end. And I never do that. I skip around. I write where there's stuff that's interesting. It's kind of fun. So I feel kind of moved to write about this. And I'd written blogs, and so we incorporated blogs in here, and we added some other stuff to it. But when you look at the book, it's all short chapters, and people love short chapters. Okay, and it's all color. So, and so this was really, kind of I wanted to create sort of a magnus opus. And if I never write a book again, I'll be happy, because I love the book and people love the book and it's so much fun. And then what we also did was, I didn't want to make it a training manual, but I knew that training was important. Thank you for bringing up this. Sure. There's 20 videos that accompany the book. And so if you want to learn how to do the creative process, and you actually did some of those videos in class, you can see me taking a group through the entire creative problem solving process. There's downloadable PDFs on that as well. And here's the thing, if your viewers want to just take a look at this, just go to Creating a Flash Book or go to my website, rogerfirestien.com. Go for the online course. There's a free online course that has all the videos, all the downloadable PDFs. It's going to be available for under online course there, John.
Right
There you go. There it is. Right.
Awesome.
Nope. Right next to it. There you go.
Oh,
Online.
sorry.
There you go.
Sorry.
And it's not a limited time offer. It's an offer forever. And so there's the outline. So there's all the videos you can watch. They'll show you how to do that. Of course, I'd love to have you buy a book, but you don't need to buy the book to take the course. But the book is reasonably priced. The hardcover is $24.95. E-version is $14.95. So it's not only a book; it's also a training program, and it's also the kind of thing that people enjoy. And I'm sure my dad would love the book because there's lots of pictures in it.
That was when I read it. I've read it like 3 times, I think, cover to cover.
Oh, thank you, John.
You're welcome. And what I really liked about it is I was always a big advocate for textbooks should just give you the nuts and bolts, and it doesn't need to be so incredibly wordy, right?
Oh God, no. Yeah.
I remember when I took art history. Oh my gosh, like tell me about Stonehenge and then move on. Like I don't need to know what the guy was thinking when he decided, or whatever. But
academic writing, it's just horrible. And and that's why I hired an editor that's not an academic writer. So she goes, "You're starting to sound like an academic."
And that's what I love about it, because you could get a lot of legway done reading, and you feel like you've actually taken in all the information you were trying to get. That is great. So I highly recommend this book, even if you're not and we'll talk about this in a second, but I would say that most people, when you ask them, are you creative? You probably get a mixed bag of responses, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know I hear a lot with my students, "Oh, I'm not creative at all."
Right. I get that all the time.
And their parents say, "Oh, I'm not creative at all." And then when you give them some parameters and you say, "Okay, now you got to do this," it's amazing how they work their way out of it. Yeah. So why do you think that there is so much self-doubt in creativity when it comes to one's ability and one's disposition on their creative ability?
Judd, I think it has a lot to do with how it's been defined or perceived. And we talk about this in the book. We talk about the 4C model of creativity that Ron Bagetto and James Kaufman developed. And I think it might be helpful to go through it. There's big C, little c, mini c, and pro C. So let me talk about that. Big C, that's probably the stuff that you're familiar with. Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Grace Hopper, Helen Keller, Mozart. Those are the big eminent creators. And most of the time, they become eminent creators after they're gone. So they're looked at and sort of deified, and I'll use that word deified as the eminent creators. So, yeah, of course, when you say you're creative, you're not gonna compare to Einstein or Curie or Mozart, for heaven's sakes. All right, so that's big C. All right.
Yeah.
Then there's little c, and this is the kind of creativity that we do every day, and it's characterized by unconventional nature, inquisitiveness, imagination, and freedom. Let me give you an example of little c, and this is a farm example. Growing up on a farm, when my dad is on the back 40 and something breaks down and all you have is some wire and some duct tape and some twine and a few bolts that are in the toolbox, you find a way to make it work till at least you can get it back home. Mm-hmm. So that's the little c creativity. And that's making a quilt using old clothing straps or like scraps, or using, like what I talked about earlier, opening up the refrigerator and making a delicious meal out of leftovers. That's little c, and it's predominant, and it's extraordinary. It's so necessary. The other one is mini c, which is kind of the creativity that happens when people are learning, or children are learning. They make a new connection. It's also the initial ideas that come out of an idea generating session. Hey, here's an inkling, here's a spark of an idea. And then there's pro C, and these are professional creatives, but they haven't reached eminent status yet. So these are like, composers for music scores, or stuff like what we're doing in many cases, the pro C. That's a musician who composes or writes musical arrangements, art director who illustrates books, the interior designer who makes your house beautiful, a college professor who creates lesson plans to make a dynamic class experience. That's pro C. So you're in the profession of creativity, but you're not up at that big C level yet. But bakers, they're doing extraordinary, chefs, pro C. So I think that's the thing. And so when you take a look at those, there's no one that isn't creative, because somebody falls into each one of those four C's of creativity: big C, little c, mini C, or pro C. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so interesting because when you start the creative studies program, you'll hear like, well, this is a skill that you can learn,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of things in life that you hear that by, and
Right.
and sometimes people don't necessarily want to buy into that. So it's just interesting that yes, you can learn that. So
Yeah.
we have your book,
Mhm.
which I believe is written really in a nice way for a layman to be able to take the creative problem solving model and apply it.
Yep.
And there's practicalities. One of the really interesting things about your book that I really like is that you have real world practical applications where it worked
Yep.
and how it worked.
Yes.
And I think when you think about like academic writing, a lot of times there's theory involved. and I'm all for some good theory, but in theory, anything can happen. But
Mhm.
in the real world, it might not happen the way that the book says. But what I liked about this is there were also a lot of local examples of
Yes.
businesses that people would recognize, like General Motors. For instance, that's a big one, and I'm not going to give it away.
Okay.
But when you buy the book, you got to read it because
Big
that
one.
is a big one. And I'm sure that company is excited that those machine operators were able to jump to action, figure that out.
Save a lot of money.
They
Yeah.
saved a lot of money, and I think that's really important, especially in a day and age where education is kind of shifting, and
Yes.
we don't necessarily have to put in the rigor maybe to understand what we're trying to get to and apply it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. And I think my job on that was I'm an academic by training, and so I have that academic rigor. So there's nothing in this book that doesn't have strong academic rigor to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you don't have to put that up in the front. Okay,
yes.
That's in the background all the time, and so I don't need to go into the statistical analysis of why coming up with more ideas is the reason. Although we touch on it a little bit in there. So what we tried to do is we tried to give examples and model people that are using this, and then introduce the techniques that way. And then when we do have academic research behind it, we do cite it and stuff, as of course. But it isn't theory. I'm a theory guy, but I'm more of a practice guy. So show me how to use it. And that's why I'm not a full-time academic, because I need to be out there in the world and experiment this and try this off and try this out and create new tools and learn new things and all that kind of stuff. And maybe we'll talk about that in some of the other projects that we're working on as well. But the main idea is that I wanted to present people in there that are real live people that are applying this stuff, that are doing it, and not somebody that's out on some pedestal like an Einstein or the inventor of Post-its or some big or Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs, and those are the classic targets that they go after these people with, or Bill Gates. They've definitely proved it. They're the big C creativity guys, but that also leaves all of us kind of left out. But we're doing a lot of creative stuff, and particularly now. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about your current projects in
Mhm.
1 second, but I want to touch on one more thing before
Sure.
we get there. So, we hear a lot about, especially during this pandemic, creativity and education. Educators are really, I have to tell you, some days I come home, I'm like, I wish that I didn't have to be so creative today on just to do my day-to-day job, right?
Right.
But what is it, and where do you think educators could start implementing creativity or creative problem solving into their curriculum so that students are able to get this throughout their life? I mean, this is we work so hard on math, writing, English, social studies, science. We're just starting to put the arts in there a little bit finally. But why is it that we can't seem to fit that in if creativity is like the number one trait that any company is looking for in their candidates?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. And I think, first off, I'm going to give you a reference of folks that are doing this much more than I am. All right. And then I think the idea, and I think you hit on it, is like fit it in. Because if we think it's something's extra, it's going to have to get fitted in. Right. So just for example, say folks need to come up with story ideas for English courses. Well, teach them how to do brainstorming while you do that, or they need to analyze something more thoroughly. Teach them how to do clarifying the problem on that, or they need to evaluate, teach them the pluses, potentials, concerns technique that we talk about in the book, which is a tool for evaluating ideas. I have a friend of mine who's an art instructor, and she would use the pluses, potentials, concerns technique when they did their art critiques, or have teachers critique papers that way. There are a limitless amount of areas to apply creativity in education. And I want to give you a website to take a look at. The website is creativityandeducation.com, I'm pretty sure. And the person that's running that is Dr. Cindy Burnett. Do you see Cindy there? And yep, is that it?
Yep, I'll pull it up right now.
Great. And she and Ismet Mamnoon are doing extraordinary stuff with creativity and education, and they are the people to talk to about this, because that's what they spend their life doing, and through all the grades and everything. So, Dr. Cindy Burnett and Ismet Mamnoon. So both graduates of the program, both former students of mine. Cindy's a fellow colleague of mine as well. So that would be the resource that I would say for folks to go to for everything you can find on creativity and education, because it gives you all these examples. They're doing extraordinary stuff. So I just can't recommend enough the people that are out there that are watching this in education to take a look at that website.
Sure.
And because there's lots of great stuff there. So
yeah. And I'm having a little internet faux pas right now, so I'm not going to be able to pull it up, but I'll put a link to it when we post it.
Great, John. Thank you.
Video.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So now, well, thank you for your answer to that. And
You're welcome.
I highly recommend anybody that is questioning their creativity, pick up your book, because it really give you that, that push you need to say, hey, you can do this. You do this. You just need to, believe in yourself. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. You touched on this a second. You did a TED Talk.
Yeah. TEDx.
TEDx Talk. I love TED Talks because I feel like they could be talking about the importance of an anthill on a garden of Jupiter, and it's exciting. So can we talk a little bit about preparing for that and what it would like to do?
I'll talk with you a little bit about that, and I'll talk with you about some other projects we're working on as well.
Sure.
So it will air on February the 11th, TEDx Omaha, and we actually shot it in my living room. Because everything is virtual, with the wonderful videographer that I work with, Dan Richardson. And it's not up yet. But the thing that I found that was really interesting about this was I worked with some beautiful, wonderful coaches from TEDx Omaha. And the coaching process on doing a TED Talk is really unique because, they said, look, you're the expert on this, but you really need to bring the points home in a way that you can follow it along and layer it along. So it was a neat process being coached to do this sort of a talk, and I really enjoyed it. I got a lot of value out of it, and I think we made a better project. We shot it a couple of times and got feedback on that, and so that's one project, and that's pretty much in the can. But John, I don't know if we talked about this or not. I'm in the process right now of working with the online learning system, Open Sesame. And Open Sesame is one of the largest online learning programs in the world. And I began working with them through one of my former students, Erica Switek, who has worked with them through her work with her company. And so we got to talking about this, and she connected me with her folks over there. We sent them a copy of Create in a Flash, and they said, we really like this. We like the short little stories, this kind of stuff that you've done. And so today we're loading up into the Open Sesame platform 3 videos. First one is When the Rules Change, Creativity is King. And so I think that's When the Rules Change, Creativity is King. And that's really taking a look at how innovations that were on sort of the fringe have become more viable. I mean, we use the example of telemedicine, how it wasn't widely accepted, but now that the paradigm has changed, people are using telemedicine. That's the first one. The other one is called To Solve the Problem, to make sure you're solving the real problem. And that's on clarifying problems. And in that, we use an example from heart attacks. And do you know what causes a heart attack, John?
Stress, bad eating, and just not sleeping well.
Yeah, that probably that. Yeah, but the technical thing is so, and this is this up in the 1980s. They thought that the reason why you had a heart attack is because of plaque buildup in an artery by the heart. Eventually, it would build up so much plaque, it would cut off the artery, cut off the blood flow to the heart. And so when this happened, people would they would try to cut down the patient's oxygen flow. They'd reduce their energies. You'd be in the hospital for a long time.
Yeah.
And this is until a number of studies that were done on autopsy victims, and they found that plaque wasn't the problem. As a matter of fact, in half of the cases where there were heart attacks, plaque didn't play at all. Wow. What happened was the plaque in the artery would rupture, all right? And then when it ruptured, it exposed that to the blood flow. Now, the body's natural reaction to a rupture is to clot it, okay? A blood clot caused the heart attack. Game changer.
Wow.
Blood clot. And that's why when you have a heart attack, they use the stents that goes through the blood clot, okay? That's why they put you on blood thinners, because they don't want it to clot. But that changed as a result of redefining the problem. So we were able to get some really good advice from our good medical advisor, Dr. Robert Gatewood, a cardiologist in the area. And so they weren't looking at the real problem. That's the second one. And the third one is to create new ideas, make connections. And we use the invention of the Nike waffle trainer shoe, and we do a dramatic reenactment of Barbara and Bill Bowerman making waffles on a Saturday morning. So we have a waffle maker there, and people, it's fun. And so the videos run about 5 to 6 minutes. They're these short sorts of things. There's some learning activities around this, but that's 3 up, and I'm in the process now of writing 3 more, and there'll be 2 more after that. So we'll have a total of 8 produced this year. And wow. My goal is to really make a library of that through Open Sesame. But as I was thinking about our talk today, the thing that I find at this stage of my life that what I need is a little dose of creativity every day. So, sure. If I don't get a chance to, so I'm writing these 3 scripts, and they're based on the book, but every day I add a little something to it, or and it's sort of like my mother, who's her body of work in quilts is over thousands of things. That's in the book too, yeah. But she's always has a project going, and yeah. So it's always having a project going and then skipping around and working on the project where you get the energy from. So, and then the other thing is that we finished is the online creative problem solving course, which we pointed out tonight. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of that is just to get that out. So there's good creativity stuff out there in the world. And I want people to have stuff that they can use, that they can apply. And, this stuff is so important that we can't put a price barrier on it. So, mm-hmm. That's why it's free and people can use it and share it, and all the PDFs are downloadable and writable and you can share them. So that's been my projects. So
that's great. First of all, Erica's great.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Yeah.
Really enjoyed working with she.
That's right. She was your teacher. Yeah,
my professor in the first class. She was great, and she's also been very kind to guide me through some of my projects I've worked on. And the Bill Bowerman story. Mm-hmm. I show my 8th graders on their last day of art. There's a Netflix documentary called Abstract.
Okay.
And there's a gentleman named Tinker Hatfield, who created the Nike Air Jordan and was a direct protege of Bill.
Oh,
and he talks about him. And when Bill passed away, it was very detrimental to him. He actually had a hard time getting back to work, especially with Michael Jordan, who I found out was a very big personality.
Oh, okay.
But
understood.
It's a great documentary. I the kids love it, and it's funny because when I read that in the book, I instantly made that connection to that.
Yeah.
So thinking about 2021, what you're working on your projects. Mm-hmm. Do you ever find that you just get inspired by something, maybe at like 10:30 at night, right before you're going to bed, and you're like, I really got to put this to the forefront of my
yeah.
Because it keeps happening to me, and I'm like, you know what? There's only so much time in the day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So is there a question around there, or is that? Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty much just a, well, what are your thoughts on, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that really goes back to this whole thing about, it's like if you don't wake up in the morning excited to pick up where you left your work yesterday, you haven't found your calling yet, and so I think it's natural that, because in the evenings I'll kind of cool off a little bit and then get ready for going to bed. And then oftentimes something will hit me, and I'll just have to put it in the computer or something like that. And sometimes it'll carry on. My schedule is flexible, so I can go later than I usually have. But yeah, when it hits, you got to grab it. And that's really something about being passionate about your work. I don't see that happening with people that are not passionate about their work, that don't love what they're doing, and that aren't creating something that they feel is valuable. And I think that's a really important part of your work that you're doing, John, in your teaching and in the work here, is that creating value. And there's no greater value in the world than to teach others. And that's what I feel. So,
well, thank you. I have to agree. Well, Roger, this has been a great discussion. I've learned a lot. I'm happy that you were able to take the time.
Thank you.
To talk with me today. And you know what? Continue doing what you're doing. You've had a great impact on my life so far, and I can only imagine how many thousands of other people you've helped along the way in your 40 years, according to your website, that you've been doing this. So that's fantastic. So thank you very much, Roger. It's always a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on Why Bother. My guest was Dr. Roger Firestien. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to Why Bother on Facebook and on YouTube. And we are now available on all major podcast platforms. And while you're at it, pick up a copy of Create in a Flash. You can either get it at rogerfirestien.com, or it is available on Amazon. And you know what? You're going to Amazon anyway, so why not buy something that's actually going to help you and not just collect dust next to your computer screen? I'm John Szablewski, and this has been an episode of Why Bother?